Welcome back, everybody, to the What Worked For Me podcast. Today I have Raini, who has lost 148 pounds. She's had a great journey, and I'm really excited to dive into it with her. Raini, is there anything else you want to introduce yourself with?
No, not really. That's
Awesome.
pretty much it. Just I've lost 148 pounds over the last almost 2 years.
That is amazing. So let's back up just a little bit
Okay.
before we dive into the weight loss. How did you find yourself at a place where you needed to lose 150 pounds, we'll say? How did you get there?
So a few different things, a few were medical issues. I tried 20 years ago to start my family when I was married, and we I was diagnosed when I was 17 with PCOS. And so I knew that having kids was going to be an issue at that time. 20 years ago, PCOS was kind of just barely starting to make a name for itself. And so when my ex-husband and I tried to start our family, we found it very difficult. And so we went on a journey that many women with PCOS go on, which is infertility treatments. And those drugs are not kind to your body, not kind at all. In fact, the first month that I was on those drugs, I gained 35 pounds.
Wow.
And I went to my doctor and I said, something's wrong. And they just said, no, it's just your body getting used to everything. Let's just keep watching. And I continued to gain more weight. Um, Resulted in no pregnancies, but we ended up adopting. But little did I know, all of those infertility drugs had destroyed my thyroid. So I kept going to doctor after doctor saying, please help me. I'm continuing to gain weight. I don't know why. I can starve myself. I can work myself to the bone, and I'm only gaining weight. I can do what a normal person would do, and my weight would just stay. I would never really lose. And doctor after doctor kept telling me, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And then about 5 years, 6 years ago, I finally found my mom had gone to a doctor, and this doctor had diagnosed her with Hashimoto's. And so she called me up the next day and was like, I think you need to go see this doctor because you have all of the symptoms of this Hashimoto's. And I was like, yeah, that's okay. I'm good. I don't need another
Not for me.
doctor. I don't need another doctor to tell me that everything is just fine, because that's always been the answer. And so she's like, no, I really think that you need to go in. And I said, no. And she says, you either go in or I will drag you in. So I went in
That's
and
a good mom.
right. So I went in and talked to this doctor and told her everything. And she says, well, I think we need to check your thyroid. And I said, I've been seeing an endocrinologist for years because I have PCOS, and I've always been told that my thyroid is fine. It's on the lower end, but it's fine. And she said, well, based on new studies that have come out, we're finding that the scale that was once used for thyroid is not quite as accurate. And it's actually a lot different now. So let's just check and see where you're at. She called me up a couple days later and said, how are you even functioning? And I started to cry, like I told you earlier, and just said, I'm not. And I don't know what to do. I've just been living this way for 15 years and I'm miserable and I hate every second of it. And she's like, well, your thyroid is not functioning. And she's like, let's put you on thyroid medication and see what happens. And I laughed at her and I said, I guarantee I'm going to stop doing what I've been doing, and I will take the medicine and I will come in next month and I will show you I will have gained weight. And she said, deal. And so we went on medication. I stopped all the exercise, I stopped all that stuff, and I went in and I had lost 25 pounds. And
Wow.
I was like, okay, maybe there is something to this.
So I'm
And
sure
this,
that probably gave you one kind of realization now it's possible.
yeah,
So that probably made you excited.
it did.
And then if you had already stopped everything, then you were probably like, well, now I'm excited to see what I can do
Yeah.
if I start trying some of these other things. So what did you do from there on out?
So then I just started focusing on working out more. I was doing CrossFit at the time and really loved it and enjoyed it. And I continued to lose another like 30 pounds. And then everything just kind of halted. And I was a little frustrated We went in and adjusted some medications. I lost probably another 5 or 6 pounds and then just kind of plateaued. And then I
How
was
do
like,
you
what?
deal, sorry, how do you deal with that psychologically? Like when you hit those hard plateaus, how did you deal with that?
At the time, I went turned back to food. I had a really unhealthy relationship with food.
Okay. And so what
It
do you
was
mean by turn back to food? Just start stress eating again?
just started stress eating again. My big thing was Dr. Pepper. I drank Dr. Pepper like I was going out of style.
Yeah. I think soda
And
gets a lot of us.
soda, yeah. And but then I would be like, okay, I need to stop this. I need to get going again. And I just would do my best to try to like break it. And I kind of lost and gained over the next little while that same 50 pounds. I just kind of yo-yoed. Um, and then I got a little bit older and I started noticing my hormones were a little out of whack. And so I went in and I got on hormone replacement therapy. I got on progesterone and testosterone, and that made a big difference. I had a lot more energy. I wasn't feeling like I couldn't work out. Like I'd come home from work before and I would just be so tired that I'd be like, I'm not going to go to the gym today. And but when I got my hormones regulated and figured out and back to where they should be, I had the energy. I was working out a lot more. I was feeling really good. And then I went through a divorce. And that sent me back
So
to
that seems
food.
pretty rough. So let's just so we
Yeah.
can keep everyone track. So you said you got to about 315 was your biggest,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and then you lost 50, 60 pounds. So we're probably
Uh-huh.
mid 200s. We'll say 250.
Yep.
And things you feel like are finally kind of going your way or on track, and then you
Then I
get
went
in a
through a
divorce.
divorce.
And
Yep.
so then what happened then?
So I again turned back to food as a coping mechanism and ballooned back up to that about 315. And about 2 years ago, I finally said, enough is enough. I'm tired of living this way. Plus, as a single mom, I wanted to make sure that I stuck around for my kids. Um,
Right.
and and so I got into therapy, started addressing my internal struggles and my relationship with food and figuring out why I turned to food. And once I started feeling like I had a handle on that, I started really focusing on the physical aspect of things. So what I did is I set myself goals. I said, okay, I want to lose 20 pounds. So I took that 20 pounds. I figured out what my metabolic caloric intake would be to just be at that 20 pounds.
Right.
And that's the calories I shop for every day. And I would work out. I focused on my protein intake. I try to get 100 grams of protein every single day, and I try to keep my carbs around about 100 as well. 100 grams of carbs every single day. I quit the soda. I quit everything like that. I stopped drinking as much as I was, and really just focused on that. And once I hit that 20 pounds, I readjusted my calories for another 20 pounds. And I just broke it down 20 pounds by 20 pounds by 20 pounds until the next thing you know, I'm 148 pounds later.
I mean that was an amazing way to skip over the fact that you lost 150 pounds. So how long did that take you? You did 20-pound intervals. How
I
long did
did it
that take?
20-pound intervals. It was coming off a lot faster the heavier I was.
Okay.
The heavier I was, it was coming off really, really fast. Just because when you're bigger, your body burns a lot more calories.
Yeah.
This last 20 pounds has probably taken me 5 months to lose.
Okay.
And I have about 10 more pounds to go until I hit my goal that I set for myself. Well,
And
17 pounds.
what are
I'm
you
gonna
at right
shoot
now
for
then?
one. I'm shooting for 150. And
150.
then,
So
uh-huh.
that'll
Yep.
be a 160, 170 pounds almost then down.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep. So
And so sorry, how long, when did you said 2 years ago is when
two
you
years
started.
ago.
So it's taking about
Hmm.
2 years to get
Yep.
down. I want to rewind just a little bit. What were some of the triggers that you had to identify that were some of your unhealthy habits with food? that you were able to get over? Because you said that that was a big part of it, and I think
It
that's a part of it for
was.
everybody.
It
I'd love to talk
was.
about that a little bit more.
So my main one was I noticed nights were my worst, especially the nights that my kids were at their dad's house because I felt lonely. My house wasn't as loud as it normally is, and especially during the week, your friends are busy, everybody's busy and has a life, and I found myself just being bored and going to the fridge or the pantry and pulling out snacks and eating snacks. And when I started focusing on how many calories I was consuming, a lot of that begins to tie into portion control. And when I realized portion sizes, it blew my mind.
Right?
you know, I mean, we don't have any problem sitting down with a bag of chips, and the next thing you know, you're like halfway through a bag of chips. When you sit down and you figure out your portion sizes, you've realized that you've consumed like 4 servings of chips and without even thinking about it, and so learning portion sizes was huge in realizing how much I was actually consuming when I would just go to the pantry at night and eat.
Because you were just kind of stressed or lonely, and so
Hmm.
just being
Hmm.
conscious of what was actually
Just
going.
being conscious of what was there. Another thing I did, what I realized too in the mornings is, you don't think about just swinging by Starbucks and getting a coffee that has like 300 calories in it. And, then you're starving all day long because you've jacked your body full of sugars with really just empty calories.
Right?
And so giving up those kind of treats or finding ways to tweak that stuff. Like I still have a Starbucks, but I get the sugar-free syrup and I ask them to put it in I get a small one, but I ask them to put it in a big cup. And then I use my protein shake inside my coffee to give it more of that flavor and have that cream. And then I'm only at 170 calories and 30 grams of protein or 20 grams of protein. So just
That's
finding
great.
ways to still get what you want without sacrificing the work that you're putting in.
Right? Because nothing's worse than feeling like you're putting in work and not
Right.
getting what you want.
And it's really easy to sabotage yourself. Really easy.
Yeah. How have you found yourself kind of self-sabotaging? You talked about stress eating. Was there anything else that you had done?
Stress eating was my big one. And also just coming home and sitting down instead of going straight to the gym after work. That if I found myself, if I came home and got going with my day after work, then 6:30, 7 o'clock comes around and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym this late because then I'm going to have to work out, and then I'm all wired from working out at the gym, and then I've got to come home and shower, and I've got to be up by 5:30 in the morning for work. And
Just one
so
thing leads to another, and
one thing leads to
get lost in
another.
excuses, and then before you know
Exactly.
it, you're done.
Exactly. So I made a goal of, I keep my gym bag in my car and I take it with me in the mornings, and just go straight to the gym right after work and then come home. There are so many different ways that you can find yourself getting sidetracked if you're not conscious of it. And I think that's really one thing that I tried really hard to do, is to become conscious of the decisions and the behaviors that I created for myself, such
I like
as
that.
that mindless eating, or the, well, if I don't go to the gym right after work, then I'm not going to be able to, I will come up with an excuse to not go later on. So,
Right. So you brought up the gym. I know earlier you
mhm.
touched on the fact that you were doing CrossFit. Is that the training that you did throughout this entire 150
No,
pounds of
no,
loss?
I
Let's talk about how
wish.
your training progressed then.
I wish it was, because I really do enjoy CrossFit. I love the community with it. It's too expensive.
That will happen.
So yeah. So my work pays for a gym membership. And so I just go to my local Vasa. I started out just walking on the treadmill just to get my steps in. And then once I started going and feeling comfortable being in that environment, then I kind of started looking at different machines and saying, okay, well, today I think I'm going to work on legs. And so I would just kind of go around and do legs exercises until I felt comfortable and started making friends at the gym. And then I would start asking people, what do you do for this? Or you have a physique that I really like, or you look like you're knowledgeable. What do you suggest I do? And so then it's just kind of morphed, and now I have a regular routine. I was going 6 to 7 days a week at the gym, and then I realized I was actually overworking my body to the point where I had definitely slowed down in my weight loss and my progress. And so now I only go 3 to 4 times a week.
And you found that's kind of the sweet spot. I
Hmm.
think that's something that a lot of people go through in these journeys. It's kind of the Goldilocks situation where you're
Yeah.
doing nothing
Yeah.
and then you do too much and then you kind of
Yep.
balance back out.
Yep.
So it sounds like you're doing mostly strength training,
Hmm.
cardio for steps. Do you have a certain step goal that you shoot
I
for
just
a
try to
day?
get my 10,000 steps in. I have a desk
10,000?
job, so I make sure that I spend a lot of time standing. I've got a standing desk. So I make sure I spend a lot of time standing. I try to make sure I take breaks. I've got my Apple Watch that goes off. It tells me when it's time to move a little bit. And so I try to take, some walks around my building just to get moving during the day, or else I find I've sat all day long.
Right.
So
I really
it's pretty
like
easy to do.
what you just said. You have a lot of things in place to kind of break up that monotony of sitting.
Hmm.
I know a lot of the listeners sometimes struggle with getting healthy food options when you're, stuck at a desk all day. What have you done to navigate that, to be able to control your food
So
environment?
I actually I eat a lot of nuts. I have a drawer, my snack drawer. I've got nuts, I've got protein bars in there, I've got beef jerky. I also usually will do my favorite obsession snack right now is those little mini sweet peppers with
Oh,
chive and onion, cream cheese, and everything but the bagel seasoning. That's
sounds
like
pretty good.
it's so delicious. But I try to make sure that I'm more of like a savory person than a sweets person. Sweets I can give or take. But you give me a bag of chips or some fries and I can down that like crazy. So I try to find more of those savory snacks that are just really easy that I can just grab and if I need to. But I find that if in the and I'm really a repetitive person, so I do have the same thing for breakfast every morning. I meal prep my lunches, and I try to make sure that the dinners that I do choose to make and do make, I have enough so that I can use that for my lunch for the next day. So I really have cut down on my eating out and eating at lunch especially. So that's one thing that I try to do. I find that if I have repetitive things that I just kind of cycle through, it's a lot easier to stay on in my calorie count and my calorie deficit, but also I know what's expected and I know what I'm going to be eating, and so I don't have to think, which is
That makes
really nice when you're busy.
right, because I think that's the thing that gets people. So
Mhm.
you brought up calories and macros. Are you still really following that pattern? Do you do more intuitive stuff now that you've been going for so long?
I'm still focusing on that because I haven't hit my goal yet. And so I'm still working on that, but I'm not as strict as I was.
So kind of slowly taking off the training wheels. You're still
Right,
using them, but
right,
not fully
right.
relying on it.
I mean, it used to be that I would never have like a soda or anything like that for the first little while. I never did it. But every once in a while, I'm like, okay, and I'll get myself, a small drink if we go out to dinner or something like that. But I don't even finish all of it. And I wanted this. If I told myself if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it the right way, because I found that all of the times that I had tried and failed before, I had been as strict as absolute possible. And then I found myself going off the rails and giving up because it wasn't something that was sustainable long term. And so this time I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that I can still enjoy things if I want it. And that's the thing is it's if I want it now. So if we go out to dinner and like we go to the Cheesecake Factory and I want a piece of cheesecake, I will find somebody, I'll be like, do you want to split this with me? And if they don't, I don't get it because I I know that I will eat the entire piece of cheesecake and get rid of my goals. And so then I have to kind of say, okay, are my goals worth this or not? So
You touched on something I really like there, and that I think is could be said with like breaking that diet mentality and focusing on something for the long term.
mhm.
Can you give us any other examples of how you were able to do that? You know, find those behaviors that were good for, maybe a month or two, but be detrimental in the long run and take those out that has made you be so successful for the last year and a half?
I think a lot of it really has to do with finding different ways to cope with stress. Because I think so food is such a huge part of our culture here in the United States. Um, Food is at every function. If something happens, oh, can I bring you dinner? Or oh, can I bring you this? Or here's a treat because you did something good. Food is such a huge part of what makes up our society. And so it becomes that comfort to us because it always, I mean, if you think about a lot of things, when people think about their memories are usually something that somebody made for them or some kind of food that they would eat. And we turn to those for comfort because of stress, and those were always good memories focused around the food. And so I think learning how to better manage my stress without turning to food and seeing food as a way to calm myself and comfort, I think that's been a huge thing because now I can say, okay, I'm feeling stressed out. I've looked in the pantry 3 times. It's time to just go on a walk instead. And
So
finding
that's
those
great. You just figured out how to replace it then, is
right.
what your
Hmm.
strategy was. That was the
Yep.
key, is you said, okay, I'm not going to turn to food. I'm going to go for a walk. And
Right.
then, great.
Yep. Yeah. Because it it's so easy to turn to food because of the way food is processed now. It is a lot more addictive. Plus, like I was saying, it's so much part of our society that it's just embedded in us to turn to food for comfort. And I mean, I'm not perfect at it. I still find myself doing it every once in a while, but I try to catch myself a lot quicker now so I don't sabotage myself.
That's great. On the note of self-sabotage, something I've seen is when success sometimes can be the worst thing for success. So when you've accomplished so much, how do you stay hungry and keep going and wanting to keep going on the goals?
It's it's really hard actually. I mean, at least for me, because I used to think to myself, if I just got skinny, it would solve all my problems. And it doesn't. It just brings on other problems and
Right?
other insecurities. Like I used to just think to myself, if I just got skinny, then I would be happy with who I am. Well, now that I am, I'm finding that I'm really insecure about loose skin instead of my weight, and I'm insecure about wrinkles that are showing up that didn't before. And so it's you just have to learn to reevaluate your goals and just say, like, I'm so close to this goal that I never thought in a million years that I would get to. So now I'm like, okay, once I reach that goal, well, now what am I gonna do? And so I've decided that while I'm not going to actually, um, well, I, I want to run a half marathon, and
That's great.
I've ran one before. I was about 120 pounds heavier, so I really want to see where I'm at and how I do next time around with being a lot lighter than I was. So it's just finding other goals to replace the other goals with.
I like that. You brought up something else that I would love to get your perspective on is you talked about you ran a half marathon almost
Mhm.
100 pounds heavier. How, when you're talking about your training, how much has it changed from when you started as far as you probably have a lot more options what you can actually do now?
Oh, so much more. Was actually talking to one of my friends at the gym about this. Just, he's kind of watched me on my whole journey. And I was talking to him about this because I was like, I'm finding myself, my weights are changing as I'm lifting, and I feel a little weird about it because like I was working on my back squats today, and I was finding that my back squat had gotten a little bit lighter, and it's because I'm reaching different depths. And so the way that I was before and heavier before, I couldn't get the form and the function and the depth that I could. And now
with
that I
restricted
can,
mobility.
right, I was limited by that stuff. And now that I'm able to get that, I've had to take a step back a little bit, but I've got better form and function. And so there's a lot of different things. My friends and I, we've got a season pass to USANA for summer concerts. And it used to be I'd have to sit down. I couldn't stand up through the entire concert. I would have to sit down. And the next day, my whole body would just feel like I got hit by a truck. And this summer, I'm out there running around and dancing. And the next day, I feel fine.
That's great.
So it's a big difference, a big difference.
I'm sure at the start it can be hard when you're that limited on your mobility. What did you do to not just get frustrated and give up when you maybe got to the gym and even doing something like a squat was really difficult? How did you work through that frustration and those hurdles?
I cried a lot. God, it's really hard not to get down on yourself when you start getting physically active. It's really hard to not be like upset that you let yourself get to that point where you're like, I can't even do a squat the way that I should be able to. Um, So I did. I cried a little bit, but I also was like, you know what? If I want this bad enough, which I did, and I think everybody kind of reaches that point where you have to want it bad enough. And all the times that I tried before, I didn't want it bad enough. And this time I did. I was really tired of feeling tired all the time, of being out of breath just climbing the stairs, of being out of breath changing the laundry, of not being able to enjoy going out with friends because I was worried that a chair would break if I sat down in it. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And so every time I'd get a frustration at the gym, I would really have to look at myself and ask myself, do I want to give up? At the time, I'm 46 years old, and this is the only body I have. And I can either continue down the path that I was going and leave my kids behind when they're still young, or I can fix myself.
Really great. And I love that you touched on, really knowing your why. A lot of times these journeys come with a lot of self growth. How are you able to kind of forgive yourself? Because you talked about being mad that you let yourself get there. Was there any process there of maybe letting go of that past trauma and just saying, okay, we got to start fresh and move on?
That's still a work in progress. That
That's
really
fair.
is still a work in progress because I and it goes back to it kind of changes and warps. And because now that I can do the things that I haven't been able to do in years, I haven't been this thin in probably 25 years. um I'm thinner now than I was when I got married. And so it's it's really hard to not be mad at myself, thinking of all I could have felt this good for years. And I made decisions in life that kept me from, I mean, a lot of it wasn't my fault. I did have some medical things that went against me, but even after I got those fixed, I still made excuses, and still made choices that kept me from enjoying the life that I'm enjoying now. And so it's still a work in progress to not be upset at myself because I do feel so good and I can do things that I've never been able to do I can go to Lagoon and not be afraid that I won't fit into a seat on a roller coaster.
Those
And
things are so hard.
it is. It really, really is. You know, I was on a business trip uh right when I kind of first started this journey, and I was in Florida, and I decided to go to Disney World by myself while I was there. And I found myself not going on a lot of the rides because I was afraid that I would not fit into that seat. And I think about all of that I missed. And then this summer went to Lagoon with some friends, and I was able to ride all of the rides and had the best time. And I just compare the two different scenarios, and it's really hard to not be upset at yourself for missing out on so much in life.
Yeah. That's really hard. I think you're doing great now, which is great, and we can
Thanks.
always just move forward.
Yeah.
You said one thing that I think is really important. You said you did need help from the medical stuff, but then
Hmm.
afterwards you made some excuses and kind of stopped
Hmm.
your growth. How were you able to balance that? Because I think that's a tricky thing people get in where they say, well, I have like a hormone issue, so I
Hmm.
can't lose weight. How are you able to bridge that gap to, okay, now the hormone issue's gone, or now I have these medications that are helping me. Now I have to go take responsibility for the rest of the things. How are you able to bridge that gap?
I started realizing how much better I felt when I took care of myself. Because before, when I was having the hormone issues and the thyroid issues and everything like that, I didn't feel good. And it was always one of those, well, I don't feel good, so I'm not going to go to the gym. But then when I started feeling better, it was like, okay, now what's my excuse? Because I feel better physically. So I really don't have an excuse. If I don't have an excuse, I might as well just go ahead and go do it. And so that's kind of what I did is, and I really try to listen to my body. Like I can tell now that I know what I'm dealing with as far as, on the medical end of things, when I do start feeling my flare ups, because I do still struggle and have flare ups and have to get my blood work done and stuff like that. And, and it's a little bit more of a struggle when I'm off with my thyroid and stuff like that. But I know how much worse I feel if I don't take care of myself. Yeah, I'll be tired if I go to the gym, and I'll probably be more tired than normal. But if I don't, I'm exhausted. And so
Right.
it's just listening to your body and realizing that once you do have those medical stuff taken care of, you don't have the excuses that you did before.
That makes sense. So it sounds like you've learned a ton across
Mhm.
this journey. What do you think were some of your biggest mistakes that if you could go back, you would avoid?
Um, Probably not getting into therapy. I think that is a huge that I credit that a lot to why I was able to make the changes that I made is because I decided to work on, everybody has trauma. We all do. You can't live
Right.
in this world the way that it is without coming with some baggage. And I think learning to talk about that and learning to be okay with things that happened in my life allowed me to be more open to making the other lifestyle changes that I needed to make. Um, but also at the same time, I I've learned a lot about food and portion. Like I would probably learned a long time ago about portion sizes. I mean, we're always told to read labels, but until you actually start measuring things out, you do not realize how much as a
How small a cup
society
of cereal
we
is.
right.
That's what
Yes.
always gets me.
It blows my mind how much we just overeat without even realizing it because of portion sizes. That has been my biggest takeaway is portion sizes. Still to this day, it blows my mind.
Yeah, I think that's an eye-opening thing for all of us when we actually start measuring food out.
Hmm.
So you've lost. 150 pounds. You've really changed your life for the better. I think a lot of the viewers are probably not nearly that far into their journey. If you were going to give someone just one tip on what they would need to take control of their own health, what would you say that is?
Probably, oh, that's a good question. I would say, honestly, probably just start moving. Get a simple device. It doesn't have to be a fancy Apple Watch. Just get something and start seeing how much you actually move in a day and start moving more. That you feel so much better when you do. And really we don't realize how sedative we really are. You know, a lot of us sit at a desk all day long and then we come home from work and we sit down and watch TV and then we go to bed. And before you know it, you're probably only like 3,000 steps for the entire day. I know that's a lot of how I was when I first started. And so I think if you're just starting out, just start moving more.
That's great. I really like that. Thank you so much for your
You're
time.
welcome.
I've learned a ton from you, and I think the listeners have too. We touched on a lot of great topics. That's pretty much what I had for today.
Okay,
Thank you so much,
you're
and
welcome.
I'd love to hear from you again when you finally
Okay.
get to your goal of the 150 pounds. That will put you down almost a full 170 pounds, which is
Yep.
amazing. So
Yep.
thank you for your time and thank you for sharing, and
Thanks. You're welcome.
we'll just end it there.